Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, September 28th, 29th, and it's another glorious morning. It makes me sick. Like, for real though. Like, it's almost October. It is 90 degrees and it is 10:30 a.m. Where is my autumn? I'm very disturbed about this. This is take two, actually, because I came up here to my usual spot. You are used to the flies being around here because I open my windows. It's too hot. Hopefully eventually I'll be able to close my windows and won't have them flying in here, but I parked in this really pretty, like, shady area. Usually there are like cars up here and the shady areas are all taken, but I parked in this really pretty, like, shady area and thought that'll be so nice and cool. And apparently it was right under like a wasp's nest because the wasps kept coming in here, so I had to start over, and here we are. I hope that you're all doing really well. In case anybody is wondering, because I did post a video a little just on my my TikTok channel, just saying, you know, on Friday it was mine and my husband's 10th sealing anniversary. And we wanted to celebrate because we love each other and we're still very happy and still, you know, together and everything. And so we wanted to celebrate that even though we're no longer part of the church. But we didn't know what to do. And I kind of wanted to do something a little bit ironic or whatever for the day. What we ended up doing was we just got takeout and hung out with our kids. The sealing for us wasn't so much about a romantic kind of a thing. We were already married for a year because I was previously married and I got divorced, and so we didn't get married in the temple. We got sealed a year later because at the time, you know, I had to wait for my sealing to my previous husband to be dissolved. Have feelings about that. It's another video. So anyway, for us, the sealing wasn't a romantic kind of a thing or like a marriage, or it was about our family. And I had 5 kids already from that previous marriage, and Ches, my husband, is literally a second dad to them. He has loved them like his own. They call him dad, and that's what was important to us. So we celebrated with our family. We got some takeout. We watched a Halloween movie. Well, we watched The Burbs. I don't know that it's technically a Halloween movie, but it's that spooky kind of thing, you know. It was fun. And then my husband got us some champagne, and we tried that because in the movies they celebrate with champagne all the time. Now, it was not the greatest quality. We are not wealthy, and I notoriously do not like alcohol. It is god awful. It is so disgusting. I have never had anything that I like. So I was like, don't spend too much on that. But we did try alcohol. I've tried alcohol before. I did try that champagne. I don't know why people celebrate with that, because if I was going to celebrate, I'd be like, chai on me for everyone, because chai is delicious. If we ever have a celebration for any reason and we need to have something to drink, it will be chai because it is amazing. So anyway, that was kind of fun. Still don't like it, don't love it. I'm not, I know there are people out there, I have some friends, and even my husband, because my husband does like alcohol. He's not a big drinker, but he does like it. And he's been able to, you know, have a couple of nights with like his brother that, you know, they drink and have a good time. And he's a hilarious drunk. So I don't know if he's drunk per se, like, just, you know, when he's drinking, he's hilarious. He's never been really drunk, but, yeah, he's really funny, but he's like, I want you to be able to drink with me sometimes. And I'm like, okay, I'll try something, but like, I'm really not motivated to like acquire that taste. I just think it's like coffee. My kids always want me to try this coffee. It's so good. Nope, it still tastes like coffee. I don't care how much sugar, cream, whatever you put in there. It's awful. It's so gross. It's like swallowing a charcoal from hell. It's like the worst. I hate it. And that's fine. I know that a lot of people love alcohol and love coffee, and yay for you. I'm really happy for you for that. But it is not something that I am willing or interested in acquiring that taste. But it was really fun to just kind of do something that didn't have to feel like super duper wholesome. You know what I mean? Like, we did do some wholesome things. We had tacos and Halloweeny movie night with my kids, and that is what is important to us and was always important to us. But then we giggled over how disgusting this champagne was. So anyway, if you were interested, if you were curious about what we ended up doing for our 10th sealing anniversary, that is what we did. It was an interesting experience. And then, today, here I am back, and I have more to talk about. Imagine that. I actually have so much to talk about. So much. I'm going to talk about temples today, and temples are another one of those topics that I'm going to have to do a lot of videos, because it would be like 1,000 hours of video if you wanted me to talk about all of it at once, because there's just so many things, like what goes on inside of the temples. That's an entire thing. That's probably several videos on its own. How big the temples are, how many there are. Currently, there are 350 in various states of completion. Some have just been announced. Some of them are really old. Some of them are being built currently. And, but overall, currently, from announced to finished, there are 350, just for the record. How much they cost to build, what they look like, and how many hours people spend serving in them, and so on. So there's a lot to do with temples. And there will be more videos eventually. This isn't like a series or anything. This is just what I'm talking about today. Eventually I'll do other videos. But today I'm going to talk about a couple of specific things with the temple: location, cost to build, why we have so many of them, and I'm going to address the theoretical need for permanent temples. First, by their fruits ye shall know them. This is like a super quoted scripture. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. By their fruits ye shall know them. Even evangelicals quote this scriptures. What it means is that by what a person does and what they produce, if it's a good thing, then it's a good fruit, meaning it comes from good tree, good foundation, good roots, good religion. Okay? Where if it's bad, it comes from a rotten tree, rotten roots, sandy foundation. You know what I mean? So by their fruits he shall know them. If you have a person that you are getting to know and you kind of think they're a great person, but they kind of start manipulating you, or they treat you badly, or they talk behind your back, like, those are bad fruits. And that means that, the whole relationship is not a good thing, and that person may not be the best person for you to be around. So, then if you have somebody a relationship that you get into, and friendship, whatever, and that person supports you and they are kind to you and they rally around you when you're having a hard time, and they they're a good influence on you and they're good support, then that is good fruit, and that means it's a good relationship. They come from a good foundation, good background. So with that said, by their fruits you shall know them. I know that a lot of people in the ex-Mormon community, and maybe some people in the LDS community, I think that most people in the Mormon community that are active probably don't know about this unless they are like in the area. I'm talking about the new proposed Fairview Temple in Texas. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this because I would suggest that you go and find Mormonish podcast and Mormon News by Rebecca and Landon. They have talked about this multiple times. And they have lawyers that give their input, and Nemo the Mormon, he went there and did, I don't know if he actually did an episode about it or not. I know that he went to Fairview, Texas, and spoke out about the steeple height there. Anyway, I don't know how many active Mormons know about what is going on with the Fairview Temple. I know that it's a big deal in the ex-Mormon community. So what is happening, just a little snippet of what is happening, is that the Mormon Church has proposed to build a temple in Fairview, Texas, and the city of Fairview doesn't want, they don't mind there being a temple. They actually are like, that's great, build a temple there, fantastic, but you have to follow these guidelines. They have specific laws that they have set in place regarding the height and the lighting and the size of buildings in the particular area that the church wants to build this temple, because they have laws about dark skies. They have that small town feel. They want to be able to see the stars at night and stuff. And so they have very specific outlines that they want the church to follow if they want to build in that area that is zoned for certain buildings. They're saying you can change the steeple height, and I don't remember the details of the heights. They want to make it really tall, the steeple really tall, and the church is saying this is part of a religion. You cannot discriminate against us, and we can do whatever we want with it, with the building, and build it however we want and however tall we want and however big we want. You cannot discriminate against us because it's a religion. And they're saying that it's necessary for them to have that steeple height that they want in their design because it is relevant to the way they worship, which is totally false. The city of Fairview is just saying, look, you go a couple miles down the road and you can build in a non-residential area that is a commercial area, and you can make it as big and tall as you want. Absolutely. It's totally fine. But in this area, every building has to be this height or less. You cannot have something that tall. You cannot have something that bright. And the church is just threatening. And I've listened to the people in the area that are active Mormons that are coming in, and because they're having these like town hall meetings. I've listened to 2 of them in full. Like I said, the Mormonish podcast or Mormon News, it's Rebecca Biblioteca. Look her up. They are awesome. They cover this. They have had lawyers on who have discussed certain things. And I've listened to 2 of them in full. So what the church is doing is they're asking people in the area who are active Mormons to come in and talk about the church. But all the Mormons who get up and talk about it, they're like, you're persecuting us. It has nothing to do with persecution. It is so bizarre. They have like a persecution complex. It's like they enjoy it, and they want to be like, oh, we're so persecuted because I don't know, it means they're martyrs or something like that. Anyway, it's not about that. And the church now is threatening to sue, and there's RLUIPA laws, and it's so just crazy because of the fruits. Okay, and I'll get to that. The 12th article of faith does say, we believe in being subject to kings, presidents, rulers, and magistrates, in obeying and honoring and sustaining the law. However, the church in the area of the Fairview Temple is not obeying, honoring, or sustaining that law. They're trying to find the loopholes, and they're trying to get they want it how they want it. They want it their own way. So, now, I get it. The Deseret Peak Temple, which is here in Tooele where I live, is open to public viewing this weekend. And that's where anybody who wants to, you don't have to have a temple recommended. It's not dedicated yet. So you can go in and you can go on a tour and look at, like, absolutely, like, I'm not going to discourage anybody from not going, like, from going. I'm not going to discourage anybody to stay away from it. Like, go in, go see the temples. They are beautiful, big buildings that just are very luxurious. Some of them, the last couple that I've gone to have been very colorful. Most of the temples that I have gone to in my life are very, very white. And that's to represent, I guess, the purity. They're just very, very stark, very white, very clean and everything. But there's been more color in the last couple of the last couple of them that I've gone into. I don't remember where it was that I went to. The most recent one at the beginning of January of this year, actually. The interior was red in some areas, and the Payson Temple has like dark mahogany wood, which is really strange to see in a temple, at least for me. The older temples that I've been in, it's all white or beige, you know. And so I did see some pictures of the Deseret Peak Temple. I am not going to go just on principle. I don't think it's a bad thing, like, necessarily, but I have a 7-year-old, and I am trying to, she has a lot of FOMO. She hated church before we left. She didn't like to go and didn't like to be in there with her friends, like, just in class. She would give us a hard time. I want to stay with you. I don't want to go to church, blah, blah, blah. But now that she's realizing that there are friends that go to church, she's like, but I want to go to church. And she's only 7. And I don't think that she can possibly understand, you know, and I just don't want her to have the FOMO. I don't want her to have the fear of missing out or anything like that. I don't want anybody there telling her, oh, you can get married here. You know, I mean, she will make choices as she gets older. It's entirely possible any of my kids could go back to church, and I absolutely will support them and love them and understand and everything. But I think that they need to be old enough to know all the information to make informed decisions about what's going to happen when they're members of the church and what they commit to and what they covenant to and everything. And I don't think this is the age. So I don't really want to take her to go through. I'm definitely not going to go by myself. I'm not curious. I've been to lots of temples. I know what's in there. But if you are a Nevermo, or if you are curious, or if you love architecture, go and see them because they are lovely. I did see some pictures of the one here, the Deseret Peak one, and they have like pink and some, you know, beautiful stained glass windows, and they're lovely. So I would definitely suggest you check that out. But they do open the temples up before dedication so that anyone can go in and they can see what's in there. This temple was announced in 2019, and it was a surprise because I've lived in Tooele since 2008, August of 2008. That is 16 years ago. And we've been told, as long as I've lived here, that we will never have a temple in Tooele. The reason was that the Salt Lake Temple is technically our temple. You know, everybody has like a specific temple they're supposed to attend. You can go to any of them, but everybody has a specific temple you're supposed to attend because it's like your area. And the Salt Lake Temple was our area. And so it was staffed by people from our stakes, our area. All of, you know, people in Tooele would staff that temple. And they had told us that if Tooele is supposed to, I've even heard missionaries talk about Tooele. I don't remember the term they use, but it's like, you know, the celestial kingdom of Utah, because it actually, clear back in 2013, was voted the friendliest city in Utah. And it's a wonderful place here. People are so amazing in Tooele. And I love Tooele. I love living here. But the missionaries love to come to Tooele. People are very welcoming. They are, very willing to serve here. And so I imagine that has something to do with it. We've been told that there are so many active members in Tooele that go to the temple, and that if they were to build a temple here, they would not have enough people to staff the Salt Lake Temple or to be coming to the temple in order to keep it open. Now, it was announced in 2019, and we were all pretty excited about that because of the implications. It was about the same time that they started the renovations on the Salt Lake Temple, where, based on what the church has said, is that the members here in the Tooele Valley go to the Salt Lake Temple, so they're closing that. They needed another temple in order to fulfill the needs of the people here, which is fantastic. However, that was not without pushback. So originally the temple was here, and it had a different name before they changed the name, and I don't remember what it was, so I'm sorry. But they were going to build it in Erda instead of Tooele. So it was going to be in Erda, and the place it was going to be built was across the street from a drive-in movie theater. It was called Motorview, and that theater, the drive-in theater, was built in 1947. So it was over 70 years that drive-in theater was in operation. The concern for the theater from the temple was the lights. If you don't know anything about temples, or if you don't live near a temple, the temples are considered a beacon on the hill. They are very lit up all night long. They have lighting not only on the buildings, but like at the buildings, where you can literally, here in Utah, you can drive down I-15 and see, like, just all the way down the state on I-15 and see, I think, like 8 or 9, 10 temples all the way through the state. And if you drive it at night, you will see them lit up. You can look at, if you're driving on I-15 and you're in Salt Lake, you can see the Bountiful Temple and the Draper Temple and Jordan River, Salt Lake, and Oquirrh Mountain, now Taylorsville. You can see all these temples. And if it's dark, the lights are on. You can see them from anywhere you're at in central Salt Lake Valley. So, I mean, it's cool. It is cool, but not for an area that is extremely rural. It's actually an invasive kind of a site. So the light from that temple, the concern was that it would be really disruptive for the need for darkness in the night in order to show films. And if you think about it, so Erda is already a very rural area, and when that Motorview Theater, that's the drive-in theater, it was already 70-ish years old. It's 70, I don't remember, 47. Okay, so it was around 70-ish years old, 72 years old, when they announced the temple being built. And so since Erda is already very, very rural, and still rural 70 years later, you can imagine that for that amount of time, that theater has had dark nights in order to play their movies, and that is essential for their business to continue. And it had been running for that long. We used to take our kids all the time. Like, it used to be, $12 for a car. Everybody has to have a seatbelt. You can't just pack them up. But we would go there and watch the double feature, or the family weekend when they would have 3 movies, and we could get in for $12, and we'd go up to their cute little 50s style diner there, would get some nachos and some cheese, and popcorn and candy and drinks, and then put out our little camp chairs and watch movies all night long. And it was awesome. I think when I had my youngest, she's 7 now, but when I had her, I was at the drive-in movie just a couple of days before she was due, battling it out with the Braxton Hicks contractions and the pre-labor, walking around thinking, are we going to have to leave? Am I going to have to leave this movie and go to the hospital right now because I think she's coming? And we were watching the Beauty and the Beast. And so, like, I have a lot of memories there, and it was awesome. I still love that theater. It's still there, still running. But that was a concern from the neighborhood because, and also the neighborhood surrounding it was a very rural area, and that neighborhood is zoned for livestock, horses, sheep, cows, etc. And new temples. New temples always are built alongside a stake center. And there are some older temples, such as like the Vernal Temple and the Logan Temple, that are renovated churches. So they were churches beforehand, maybe not stake centers, but they were just churches that were turned into temples, and they're very small temples. They're just the size of a church building, not even as big as church buildings they're making today, but just little churches that they've renovated and turned into a little working temple. So those ones, of course, don't have a stake center built by them, but any new temple today is built alongside, like across the street from a stake center. So with the Deseret Peak Temple, they also wanted to build the stake center and a gated community. And the gated community is necessary because all of not the gated community itself, just like having a neighborhood, like a suburban kind of area with the stake center and everything, all of that is really important to have around the temple because of like the pipe work and the electrician work and everything, in order to have all the power and the lighting, the water, because they do baptisms for the dead and everything there. So all of that is important for them to have in the area. So often that's why they like to build temples in a residential area, because they have the ability to have access to power and water. But sorry, I'm looking at my notes. The residents in the area were very, very opposed to the temple building that gated community for them to have there. Like, it's also weird, like a gated community, it's very wealthy, where, you're going to live in a gated community that like is directly attached to the temple, and you have, parks and things. They were talking about how it's going to be beautiful. There's going to be parks to walk through and everything, but like that's not accessible to anybody who doesn't live in that gated community. And if you want to live in a gated community, you have to be fairly wealthy. Tooele is not a wealthy area. Most people, it's getting there, it's growing. The value of our property has gone up. For example, I moved here in 2008. I bought a new house with my new husband in 2014. When we bought our house in 2014, it's an old house. It was built in 1960, but we have 5 bedrooms, a huge yard, and it was $138,000. Now, we've done stuff to it. We had carpet in it, and we pulled that out. We've restored the hardwood floors and everything. We've done things to it, but where it's at now, even like the hardwood floor adds a little value to it just by that work, but also like not that much. Just by existing here now, we can sell it for almost $500,000, and we would make a massive profit. But we couldn't move anywhere else here because everything else also has increased in value. And we bought a little old house that is fairly problematic. We've had to fix a lot of things on it. It's a little bit of a fixer-upper. It's very cottagey. I like my house. I think it's cute. Our yard needs some work. But anyway, it's, the cost of the land and everything, just by being in Utah and being in a place that is growing pretty rapidly, like the value is much higher. But with that said, Tooele still, compared to the rest of the state, is still a not massively affluent area. So the implications of a gated community that is in an already rural area that is zoned for livestock being built there that would not be accessible to anybody in the area unless you were wealthy and bought there is definitely something that's understandable as like a pushback. So people in the area were active LDS and they were still pushing back against the temple being built there. Now, as a regular patron of the drive-in theater, that, you know, like I was behind him in the opposition to the temple. I was like, for obvious logical reasons, having a temple right across the highway, and I say highway like it really is just a main street. It's a highway in that it runs all the way from the top to the Salt Lake where Stansbury is, all the way to the bottom to Stockton, which is an even more rural area. It's just a 4-lane road. It's not like Bangor Highway or I-15 or anything like that. So it's really just across the street. And so I was behind that and I understood that. But on the other side of it, with the building of the neighborhood, I was kind of snarky. In 2019, when this temple was announced, I was a very, very nuanced member. Remember, I don't know if you've watched my other videos, I really feel like 2018 is kind of about the time when I took a long way out. I took a very scenic route as I deconstructed, but 2018 is kind of where everything just sort of hit the fan and started to unravel for me. So in 2019, I was still all in, but I was very, very nuanced, meaning that I didn't believe everything and I had problems with a lot of things, but I was still really dedicated. And the church in the area here, they didn't talk about like the very valid reasons for why people in that location were opposing the temple. They just framed it as persecution again. So like there were all kinds of comments on like social media, members of the church saying things like, you know, everyone benefits. Your property value goes up immediately. People here in Tooele will not have to travel to go to the temple. It's a beautiful building. I get it. I will get to that about the travel. I made a whole video about the costs of attending the temple. Totally valid, the travel and everything. I get it. And that's one of the reasons that I was like, yeah, like I'm being snarky about this and I want the temple in Tooele and everything too, because I was like, it won't cost me so much. Maybe I won't be so bored if I know that right after this, I don't have another commute back home, you know, stuff like that. So anyway, like, why are they complaining? It's going to be a beautiful building. It'll be within walking distance, etc. And I thought, well, those are true things, you know, and the leadership of the churches was just like, said it's a loud minority. They're a minority and they're just being really loud about it. They're just bringing attention to it because they don't want it. And like, you know, so let's be louder because we're the majority. We're going to be louder about this. And they would ask us to hand out flyers, which I was like, no, I'm not handing out flyers. But I was confused by the opposition to the temple being built in Tooele. Now, like, there were like headlines in like the Salt Lake Tribune and like, you know, news resources in Utah that said things like Tooele, Utah residents thrilled about the temple despite social media backlash around town. You know, they were thrown around and we were asked to write letters in the favor of the temple and everything. Again, I didn't do that because no, I don't know. I think at the time, like I said, I was really nuanced. I knew I didn't understand everything. I knew I didn't know everything. I knew I knew that I wasn't given all of the information about absolutely everything. And so I didn't feel like I could, with good conviction and with good conscience, write a letter and say, I'm in support of this temple when I knew that I couldn't possibly be understanding all of the details about why actual members of the church were actively opposing the temple. So because of my curiosity, you know, I started to research. I did think too, like, Tooele is It is a very, like all of Tooele, it is a very rapidly growing city. When I moved here in 2008, it was a very, very small town. And now we're getting a shopping mall, which is fantastic. I'm so excited for that. Yay, we're getting a Ross. And, and we're getting an Italian restaurant. We have so much chicken and we have so much pizza. We don't have an Italian restaurant and it's being built now and I'm so excited. Anyway, sorry, off topic. But I started to research because I thought there's so much land here, so much land. Why can't the church just pick a different plot of land? Why is it that complicated? And I just thought, I'm going to start to research this. So I did. I started to research it. And remember how I mentioned that the church wanted to build that gated community? Well, in order to build that gated community, the city ordinance would have to be changed from rural to allow for suburban buildings and zoning, which would mean that those people living in the area would lose their ability to have the livestock on their land. And people who moved to those locations specifically for a rural feel, the temple would destroy that completely. So I started to understand that. And not only that, but like, while property value going up sounds really good, just kind of like as a concept, it isn't for people who plan to stay here. Because when property value goes up, also property taxes go up. And that means that people who are living in a low-cost area like Tooele, which is the reason we moved out here. I didn't want to move to Tooele. When I moved here, I had moved here from Alabama because we were active duty military at the time. And when we moved here, moved back home from our active duty military service, I didn't want to live in Tooele. It was far away from my family. I wanted to live out in the valley somewhere, but we looked at probably 50 different homes. And there was one in West Valley, which is, not all of West Valley is bad, but the part we were looking in was not a safe area. And we walked into this house and it was a complete dump. Like, maybe they were renovating it or something, I don't know for sure, but the entire back wall of the house, like you could walk up to the door and it looked like a normal house. You walk in and the entire back wall of the house was gone. It was missing. It was taped off with plastic. And I don't know what they were doing, but they were selling it as is, and it was $350,000 then in 2008. And so I was like, I don't want to live in a house that is going to just be like a money pit. Like, I'm okay with something that needs work, but I need to live somewhere that's safe, and I need to live somewhere that is a whole house, you know? And so we looked into Tooele at the behest of our agents, and we did really like it here. It was a really beautiful little community, and we were able to see that it was, you know, it was really nice. The neighborhoods the houses were well priced. And so that's what we did. We moved out here. And then when I got remarried, we stayed here because the prices were so good. And so when you are living in a low cost area, you know, and Tooele largely, at least when I moved out here, was a bedroom community. People lived here and they commuted out to the valley to work. They'd go out to the valley, and there's a whole parking lot here that is for people taking the bus and for people who carpool. So there's a whole parking lot here where people will go and meet and park their cars, and then they will drive into the valley together and then drive back home together. So that's, you know, people are living here in this lower cost community, and it's not just like, well, if you sell your house, you can make a really good like profit on it. No, it's, you know, as soon as the next year rolls around, your property taxes have increased by 300%. That instead of paying $1,000, you're paying $3,000, you know, more, and you're paying more than that, more than you used to, and more than you agreed to when you moved here. But the property value goes up, and so therefore your property taxes does. And so it affects people pretty immediately. And yeah, growth happens. It does. It is growing out here. And some of those things people are going to have to learn how to deal with. People are going to have to come to terms with. But also some things we don't have to. And so, the ending to the Tooele Temple fiasco is a pretty happy ending. The church instead moved the temple from Erta to a completely desolate area in Tooele proper, just 3 miles south of the original location. It's behind the Home Depot, where a suburban community was already established and was actively spreading and developing outward. And so the church officials wrote, and I quote, "There is a sincere desire in the part of the church to avoid discord in the community." And that brings us back to the Fairview Temple. So here we are in Fairview, threatening to sue, claiming all kinds of false religious privileges, saying the spires are required to religiously be super tall, and saying that the community is persecuting them. And I've listened to 2 of those meetings in full for the last 2 of them, and there is no persecution. There is just a call for the church to follow existing zoning laws or to build the temple in the commercial area instead of a residential area. And it's not that hard, honestly. The church is cutting off its nose to spite its face. No one is going to look at that temple that is being built, or they still have a ways to go. They have to fight and everything. It's probably going to be a couple years, even if the church wins. But whenever anybody looks at that building and that temple, they're not going to be like, "Oh, it's so inspiring. I'm so curious about what's in it. I want to learn more." They're going to think, "What a bunch of privileged, wealthy, self-righteous jackasses." That is what is going to be thought. And again, that comes back to the fruits, okay? What are our fruits here? What fruits are we giving to the community of Fairview and the communities like the one that was built in Wyoming recently that the community didn't want either? Like, what are the fruits that we are giving to people to say the church is good? If this isn't those fruits, these are rotten fruits. So this is it's not disjointed. It is all connected. We're going to move on to permanent buildings here. Okay. So one of the church's biggest arguments for more and more temples is the idea that they need temples to accommodate the members who want to use them. And here in Utah, it's true. There are enough members here in Utah that the permanent buildings make perfect sense. In 2018 and until COVID hit, I had 2 kids who were of age to be able to attend the temple, and limited in a limited capacity, they were able to do baptisms for the dead. That's the only thing the youth can do for temple work. And I know personally that it was nearly impossible to get into the temple to do baptisms for the dead. I tried a couple of times to make appointments for our family to go. We had to book appointments something crazy like 8 or 9 months out, unless they went with like a youth group. And so it was very, very difficult for me to get appointments to take my kids. Most places, though, you could still just walk in whenever you wanted to and just go to the next endowment session. That's what, endowed members mean, that you've had your washing and anointings. I think most members typically go to an endowment session. It is the longest portion. When you do sealings, or you do, sealings for the dead, when you do baptisms for the dead, when you do the washing and anointings for the dead, you can do a lot of them at once because they're short ordinances. So they'll just baptize you, and then they bring you back up and they say the prayer again in a different person's name, baptize you, say the person's name in another person's name, baptize you. And they might do 10 or 15 of them. Sometimes if you're there with a youth group, they might do 5. If you're there with just your family, or you bring your own names, they might do a whole slew of them. So that's interesting. And then, when they do the washing and anointings, again, it's a short little ceremony, so they can do a whole bunch of them at once. An endowment session is something where it's like I've heard that they cut it down by another half an hour by removing some repetitive things. I am not worthy to go to the temple anymore. I don't have a desire to go to the temple anymore. So I don't know for sure exactly, but that's what I've heard. But overall, you spend around an hour. It is a long, not a ceremony, like a long procedure. And there's a lot to do with it. So it's long, and you can only go through for one person at a time. So people go back over and over and over again to do these. And so, you know, I get it. I get that there's a need for a lot of temples. I think that most of the time people can still walk in and do an endowment session and get into just the next session, and it's not a big deal. And during COVID, that was different because they had limited seating, because they kept distancing, and so you had to make an appointment instead of just showing up. And it's true that the temples are quite busy here. So just to be totally fair, I think that's important to be fair there. But I get it. You know, when people used to say to me as a true believing Mormon, and they'd be like, why are there so many temples? And I would be like, well, why are there so many McDonald's? You know, they're busy. It's supply and demand, and they'll have as many temples as they have as long as they are productive and there's people to fill them. And I think that's true in Utah. And maybe in some of the surrounding states, Idaho, Arizona, maybe California. I don't know. I don't know what the activity levels, but here's the thing, okay? In most states, and I've traveled because I lived in New Jersey and I went to the Manhattan Temple, which was an all-day trip. I lived in Alabama, and I went to the Alabama Temple, which was like, it wasn't an all-day thing, but it was like a 6-hour thing. Like, I think it was like a 2-hour drive there, 2-hour drive back, hour inside. It was crazy. You know, so but I was in a branch in both New Jersey and in Alabama. That is a branch is, so you have stakes, which is a big area that has multiple wards in it, meaning multiple areas that people meet. And then if you have a branch, it's like just a little tiny ward. I don't know what the numbers are that make up a branch versus a ward, but it's very small. And like in New Jersey, I remember they used to cancel church all the time in the winter because in New Jersey it's very humid. It's literally on the coast. But it's cold. So if it would snow, you'd look out there and you'd be like, "Oh, it's beautiful snow." No, it was like solid ice. It wasn't soft snow you can make a snowman out of or jump in or anything. It was a solid brick of snow in your front yard. The trees would be encased in ice. And so we would call and be like, "Don't come to church," because some people would travel for up to an hour to get to church. And we didn't want people to be unsafe. So they would cancel church. So I was in branches in those areas. I don't know that more temples in New Jersey, New York, in Alabama, if those are places where more temples, while it would cut down on the travel time for the active Mormons, I'm just not sure they could staff them regularly or that they would have enough people to fill them. I don't know how realistic that is. I don't have all those numbers. What numbers I do have is that the church claims to have 17 million members, but only about 3 million of them are active members, and that's worldwide. I'm honestly kind of curious if 17 million members is like a cumulative number from the beginning of the church till now at all. Like, that's a little off topic, so I'm sorry. I didn't even mean to bring up those numbers specifically. But the point is that I can see the temples and permanent temples and a lot of permanent temples being needed in specific areas like the Mormon hub that is Utah, okay? I can see that. But this is where, you know, it kind of gets a little sticky, okay? So Mormons are really expected to make like absolutely insane amounts of sacrifices on a daily basis. So I totally understand the whole idea that a permanent temple that is nearby them can alleviate some of that sacrifice. And I don't think that it's an unreasonable request or expectation for certain areas. But having said that, I have some disagreements with the execution of this. The average temple costs about $70 million to build, and it does vary by size. For example, the ones that I mentioned earlier in this video, the ones that were just renovated, those ones are closer to like 10 million, 7 million, something like that, because they weren't built from the ground up. They were renovated. They were made to meet the needs of the temple and then rededicated instead of being built from the ground up. But to build a temple today, the average cost is about $70 million to build. Now, if you don't know what a temple looks like, again, go look it up. Go Google it. Google celestial room. Google temple, LDS temples. You'll see so many pictures. Now, go ahead and Google how much the rugs and chandeliers cost. I've seen estimations that some of the chandeliers can cost $100,000. And I've seen rugs that cost $17,000. I mean, I can imagine that just carpeting a building the size of these buildings, like, that's going to be costly, and just because it exists. Like, just to get carpet in my living room is like $15,000. Like, I understand that, like, just building buildings costs a lot of money, okay? But I'm not sure that I feel like $100,000 on a chandelier is necessity. Do you know what I mean? So, as a true believing Mormon, if somebody told me this, I would have been like, well, is that too much? No, of course not. It's for God, right? Like, we want the best of the best for him, but here's a scripture for you from the Book of Mormon. So even if you're like, well, the Bible, we only believe it as far as it's translated correctly, blah, blah, blah. Here's a scripture for you. Mormon 8:37. For behold, ye do love money and your substance and your fine apparel and the adorning of your churches more than you love the poor and the needy and the sick and the afflicted. Let me reiterate that portion. Adorning of your churches more than ye love your poor, the needy, the sick and the afflicted. I don't want to hear about how much the church does for the poor. They do. They help people. They absolutely do. And I don't necessarily feel like any amount of helping people, any amount of charitable donations is anything to sniff at. I'm just saying that there's a lot more that they could do and that they don't. And they do a lot of the good things that they do very publicly so that it gets them the attention. And, the temple is supposed to be the end-all be-all of Mormonhood. You cannot go to the temple, or you cannot go to the celestial kingdom. You cannot be in the presence of God. You can, if you don't have your endowments, if you don't have, from the temple, if you haven't been sealed or married in the temple, you cannot have the celestial kingdom, which is the highest kingdom you can have, if you are not married and sealed in the temple. So people spend hours and hours doing work for the dead by proxy in the temple because of how important this is to the religion. According to the religion, no other baptism counts. So like if you were baptized in Catholicism, or if you were baptized in, an evangelical anywhere, like that baptism does not count. You have to be rebaptized into the Mormon church. Now, and you have to be sealed to your family in order to succeed into heaven and to be with your family eternally. So the idea is to literally baptize everyone who has ever lived on this planet for all of time, and to seal all of those families together. Now, you ever only go one time for yourself. The first time, so you get baptized, if you are baptized as a child or as a convert, you're baptized usually in a stake center in third world countries. Maybe you were baptized in an ocean, or maybe you were baptized in a lake or a river or something, and those would count as long as it's by immersion, that kind of a thing. But most people, like in developed countries, there's a stake center. You get baptized in a stake center. And when you're baptized, that counts for your baptism. You don't have to do that in the temple unless you're doing it for the dead. Then you need to get your washing and anointings, which is where you get your garments. And then you need to go through and get your endowments. And that's where you make a whole bunch of covenants that you don't really know what they are until you go and make them in the temple. It's another one of those really big sore spots for a lot of ex-Mormons, is the lack of informed consent. And so there's a lot of that there. And you only go through for yourself once, and then you go and get sealed to your family, or sealed when you get married, sealed to your spouse, sealed to your children. And then other than that, you go through once for yourself, and anything after that is for somebody who is dead, by proxy. So you would be going through, and every time they want you to think about your name or yourself, you're thinking of that person's name that you're going through for. Now, think about this though. It is estimated that about 117 billion people have lived on Earth up until now. So that's the estimated amount of people who've ever existed. And we don't know how many people will exist. But you can see how when Mormons believe that every single one of those people will need to be baptized, endowed, sealed to a spouse or parents in order to be with your family forever, or be with God, and that work can only be done in the temple. The temples are a very integral, important thing for the religion. However, if the temples are really that important, why not make it more accessible for people? And you might say that's why they're building temples all over, and permanent temples, and there's 350 temples. You might say that, but hear me out. And this is going to start out a little bit disjointed. I promise I will bring it back around. In spring 2023, we had a replica of the tabernacle that Moses had in the desert. And that was brought here, so a little bit more than a year ago. Was it spring 22? It was shortly before I left. I don't know if it was spring 2023. I'm sorry, I don't remember the dates. I don't remember. Maybe it was fall 2022? I don't remember. Anyway, we had a replica come here, and they set it up. I think it lasted a couple of weeks. Then they went on to like somewhere else. But they set up this replica, and Nephi in the Book of Mormon says that he built the temple based on the Temple of Solomon. And that in the annotated Book of Mormon says that it was in Ohio. Now, keep in mind, the annotated Book of Mormon, my mother-in-law let me borrow that book, and I was very, very interested in it. One of my majors in college was archaeology. I am super fascinated by archaeology. So it was really interesting to me to be like, oh, really? Like, these are the people that, lived here and everything. And that book was one of the things that started to unravel everything, because of like where I started to recognize for what it was. I always knew the Book of Mormon was racist, but it was like just kind of one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, like I guess it's racist, but like I didn't understand the depth. Do you know what I mean? I didn't understand what it was implying. And so it wasn't an issue. I guess it was a shelf matter, but it was just like, I just didn't understand. So when I got this book and I started reading it, and it said that it was in Ohio, that's where Nephi's temple was and everything. That wasn't really the specific thing. It was kind of everything all together. And I started to be like, what? This is so bizarre. Anyway, it says it was in Ohio, but we had that replica of the temple come, the tabernacle come, and we went into it, and there were 3 parts. So I'm going to read a little bit here. Try not to be like too much, but I want to make sure I get it right, of course. So there's the outer courtyard, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies. And people could come into the outer courtyard where they could offer up their offerings, their burnt offerings and things. And then then there was like the holy place, and the Holy of Holies only like, I think the prophet could go there. And then the middle part was the holy place, where only certain priests could go there, and they were always of Levite descent. So like, not all men held the priesthood at the time, and not like women absolutely did not go in. And we are always told in the temple that the temple ceremonies that exist today are based on the ancient ceremonies performed in the early church, which is the church that Jesus was supposed to have established, and the church that Nephi and his descendants had on the earth. And so we're told that they're the same temple ceremonies, which I suppose to be correct. And I assumed it was true because that's what I was told and what I was taught. And I think most Mormons think that this is true. And that when Nephi built the temple, they picture that, you know, they picture people going in there and doing the same kind of signs and tokens and sealings and family sealings and things that happen today. But because that's literally what we're taught. But Nephi says that he built it after the manner of the Temple of Solomon. And the Temple of Solomon was a permanent variation of that was based on the tabernacle of Moses, in the way that it was built and the way that the ceremonies were done, except that the tabernacle of Moses was portable. So, like I said, not everyone could go in there. It means that there weren't sealings, there weren't new names, there wasn't swearing to keep things secret or die. And yes, we do know this. We know that it isn't a corrupt history or Bible text. We know that the ancient temple was not at all like the temples are today. So I was really, when the tabernacle came, I think I was past my double down stage. Because I doubled down, and I did, and I'll do another video about that sometime, about the double down stage. Maybe I'll do like a stages of grief kind of a thing, you know, like the acceptance, the anger, the blah blah blah. It's different for Mormons. It's not the same stages of grief, but in the stage where you start questioning, you kind of double down for a while. I did things like I filled my house with pictures of Jesus and pictures of the temple, and it's so cringy now to think about it. But I think I was past that stage, and I was in the stage of like, I'm gonna leave, right? Like, I think I'm leaving. I think I don't believe this anymore. This is really bothering me. I think I might be stepping out. I didn't do it for a while still, but I think, yeah, because, you know, 2020, springish 2023, maybe like summerish of 2023 when that came. I don't remember the exact dates, but I still didn't leave for a year. But yeah, I was in that stage where I was like, this doesn't make any sense anymore. And, but I was really troubled by it. I thought that going there, I mean, like, I didn't even want to go. I was like, it's going to be more boring church stuff. Like, I'm so tired of this. And I was in the Relief Society, and I spent all of my time doing Relief Society stuff. I was a Relief Society presidency. And so I just really didn't want to go. But also, I did what I was supposed to. You know what I mean? So I went, and I thought, maybe this will really just jog my testimony. Maybe I'll feel something there. Maybe I'll feel really good about this. Maybe I'll learn something. Maybe there's some tidbit of truth, and I'll finally have that realization that's just going to give me that light bulb over my head, and I'm just going to be like, I'm have a testimony. But it didn't. It did the opposite. I was almost angry about it. But the temple is supposed to be the utmost importance, and the goal is for everyone to get there. So, little side note here. An elderly woman in my ward who had served 3 missions with her husband told me once that when people donate to the temple fund on a tithing slip, it's not given as money to build temples, which I think most members think that's what it's for, is to build temples. Instead, that fund is used for families to use toward taking a trip to the temple to be sealed as a family. This would be people in other countries where there are no temples nearby. And that in many of those cases, those families would have already sold most of their belongings and saved for years to be able to go. Once they were able to get there and be sealed, they would usually not have another chance to go in their lifetime. And that these kinds of stories are always told in conference. Literally, conference is next weekend. I dare you to listen to conference. Maybe don't, because it's like a lot of wasted hours. But like, Nemo usually does. I hope he does this year. I know that he's going through a lot right now, and my heart definitely goes out to him. But Nemo typically does, he listens to conference, so you don't have to, and then he does like a highlight reel, and it's much more entertaining. He gets all of the important topics in there, so maybe listen to that. Anyway, every single conference, there is at least one talk, but usually more, at least one talk about the sacrifices families made in order to be sealed together. And it's used as a very faith promoting thing. Never mind that, the church has billions of dollars, but it's seen as a very admirable and righteous sacrifice to give up everything in order to go and attend the temple, because it's that important to get your family sealed together, or you cannot be together in the afterlife, in the next life. So I am still super shocked and horrified and saddened by this. Moses' tabernacle was portable. Why does the church spend that average of $70 million? Per permanent temple, when they could alter the design of the tabernacle just a little bit and have a whole fleet of portable temples that could be run by missionaries and travel in a consistent rotation, so people would not have to sell all of their possessions, travel for an extended period of time, or only go one time, especially since, like I mentioned, that the biggest portion of temple work is for the dead. So going once yourself is great, but it actually doesn't further the work that the church deems so important. Not to mention, with $150 billion or more that the church has, why does any family have to sell everything that they have and then wait and save for ages in order to go? With technology and finances that the church has access to, there's literally zero reason that any worthy family or any worthy member shouldn't be able to attend temples as soon as they meet the requirements. $1 million permanent temples do not solve this problem. Not worldwide. Maybe in Utah, but not worldwide. So while contemplating all of this, I also became very, very frustrated about the implications of the vastness of work to be done for all the dead. Why is that even necessary? I feel like it's a lot of busy work. It just keeps Mormons busy. It keeps them preoccupied and focused on the temple work and on their busyness, so that they don't have to think about all of the other implications and untruths and abuse and trauma and injustices that go on in the church. Mormons are, according to Google, 0.212% of the population that exists right now, let alone the population on Earth of all time. So that's a lot of work that needs to be done. But why do we need to do that for them? If everything prophesied is true, they will have the opportunity to choose baptism during the millennium when they're resurrected, right? What about all the people that there's never any record of? They're people that existed that we don't have any record of. If living people are the only way that the dead get to have the opportunity, then are they just like out of luck? Like those people that were, 25 years old and killed by the saber-toothed tiger, like that person's like completely out of luck? Like, no. Okay, like according to LDS gospel, everyone gets resurrected, and everyone who didn't have the opportunity to learn about the church in the lifetime will have the opportunity to accept it in the next lifetime, because our loving God would not leave anybody out. He just judges you, but he doesn't, he doesn't want you to drink coffee, but he's not going to let you miss out on the opportunity to join this bizarre church. So anyway, if everybody is resurrected and everybody gets to have their body back, why can't we plan for them to do that then? Why can't we plan to do baptisms for people who have been resurrected and sealings and everything? Like, what about all of those people who were in marriages that were sealing together and women just didn't get divorced because they were abused from abusive husbands, because they couldn't own land, they couldn't have a job, they couldn't support themselves, and it was legal for people to not even like rent to women who had children or who were single. So there was like a real need for women to be attached to a man. How many of those people are we sealing into disastrous, horrifying relationships? Now, I get it. They say everything will work out. Everything will be worked out and resolved when Christ comes. We don't have to worry about it. It'll be okay. If you don't want to be with the spouse, you won't have to be, blah, blah, blah. When really like the entire, like there's just, I can't even, because that's like they say that, but it's just not. It's not really what is taught. It's not really what the culture teaches or what people really believe or what they receive when they collect that data and internalize the teachings. So anyway, I just don't understand why those people shouldn't be given the opportunity if this is all true and we all are going to be resurrected, why can't we just do that in the next life? I don't know. Because then we could use the hours upon hours of service, telling our congregations to use that time. And instead of sitting there in the temple, doing work for the dead, people who may or may not care or may not even accept it because they do have the choice, go out into their communities, find people and organizations to feed and clothe and care for those who are in need in order to relieve the suffering of people in this life. The church is so far removed from service, like actual service. It's just incredibly disheartening. And that is all I have for today. And I've talked for an hour and my throat hurts now. So I think I'm probably going to have to start bringing like water, because I haven't yet so far, but my throat kind of hurts now. I talked your ear off, a little longer little longer talk. Then I affectionately call them my talks. I'm working on my talk right now. I'm working on my lesson. It's just one of those Mormon things I probably can never escape. But I do sincerely appreciate your listening to this. I sincerely appreciate your feedback and your interactions. Please like, please share, please comment, please give me your feedback. If you have a question, if you want to talk about anything, if you want to leave me an anonymous comment or experience or something, you're more than welcome to email me. My email is Brae, it's BRAE .wordsofexmormon@gmail.com. That's EXMormon, so Brae.wordsofexmormon@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. I am super excited for the upcoming months. I have some really fun and spooky things maybe planned for October. I am getting into, this is my world. I love this time of year. Halloween, Thanksgiving, Yule, Christmas, Valentine's Day, all of winter and everything. Summer can bite me. It needs to go away. But I know. Everybody loves summer, but I don't. I love fall and I love winter. Anyway, I'm getting into it and I'm super excited for the upcoming things. Please stay tuned. Please follow, share, tell your friends about it. You know, and I hope you have a really good week. I will talk to you next week. Ooh, there was another wasp. Anyway, thank you again. And you can, if you're watching this on any of my other platforms, on TikTok or Instagram, you can see the entire video instead of in portions. You can see the whole video on my YouTube channel. The link is in the bio. And thank you again. I've said that a million times. You have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you soon.